So I'm listening to you and I have all these things happening inside of me and I keep thinking, you don't have what I have. These feelings are like a fucking volcano right now for me.
I enjoy inflicting pain on people. I'm a sadistic narcissist. So very often I would externalize my internal aggression in order to kind of enjoy the effects on people.
People are good and they don't deserve to be hurt. They don't deserve to be treated that way. And that you see vulnerability and you pounce on it like a fucking lion on a gazelle is wrong.
Who the fuck am I? Who the fuck are you? Who the fuck am I? Who the fuck am I? I am a very sick person. I live in Iowa. I am a pathological cerebral narcissist. Woe is me, right? Woe is everyone that has had to encounter this child. That's right. I am a 6-year-old in a 37-year-old male's body. That's kind of a complicated statement to be so brief about, but we'll get there. I'm not a professional. I'm not a clinician. I am only talking from an autobiographical point of view, and I do use some academic references, which I will put at the beginning. But I've lost everything in my life. I've lost my family, my friends, trust, from everything you can imagine. The most massive rock bottom that could ever happen. At that point, I didn't know what was wrong with me. I didn't know what the fuck was up with me. And so I've been on a journey for the last 3 years, finding out what is this thing that is up with me, and can I heal from it? I don't know. So yeah, I'm no professional. I'm more of a fire hazard or a liability. Okay, some misconceptions about NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. Number one, it seems that popular culture has revived the word narcissist as a term to willy-nilly describe a jerk. Really, it's a very serious medical condition and beyond. It's a fucking phenomenon. There's lots of people that suffer from it. As a result, other people suffer because of them. And number two, that narcissists only love themselves. Well, it's actually the exact opposite. The reason the narcissist adopted narcissism is because of deeply seated self-hatred. See, the narcissist only responds to external things. He's in love with your impressions of him. Somebody only capable of loving impressions is incapable of loving people, himself included. How does narcissistic personality disorder develop in a person? Well, there's two ways. It's generally in childhood from a chaotic and abusive upbringing. The other way is from pampering and spoiling the child. With both abusive behaviors, you're objectifying the child in both senses, and you're giving them both a traumatic break of reality. There has been 2 major studies on narcissistic personality disorder. One in the 1930s that involved like 13 people, and then one in the 1990s that involved about 1,100 people. And what they found, with no exception, without a doubt, that 100% of these cases were all from traumatic upbringings. These were all traumatized children. So we got to look at this a little differently. You know, if these characteristics, these attributes were to be labeled with an adult, it would be despicable and disgusting and unacceptable. But if this is coming from the place of a child, then we have a different picture and we have to look at things differently. That's why a lot of these people like Sam Vaknian and other brains in the world are saying that, wait a second, fundamentally, narcissistic personality disorder is not a personality disorder. There's no personality. It's just a series of self-defense mechanisms. So what we're seeing is that it's actually a post-traumatic stress response to early childhood trauma. The child is either put on a pedestal or the pedestal is put on the child. Not that intelligent. This is my interpretation of the information he has delivered. So if we're going to go any further, you need to understand these terms. There's 3 terms you need to really understand the core here, which is narcissistic supply, the false self, and the superego.
I'm a narcissist, so my main motivation is what is called narcissistic supply. Essentially attention. Narcissistic supply is a fancy name for attention. I'm also getting money, but that's a secondary consideration. Narcissistic supply, attention, is what I use to regulate my sense of self-worth. You see, my sense of self-worth, as opposed to normal people or healthy people, fluctuates constantly. It's labile. It goes up and down. And when it's down, it's very down. And so I need to regulate it. I need to stabilize it by having people telling me that I am as fantastic, as grandiose, as omniscient, as omnipotent, as brilliant, and as perfect as I imagine myself to be.
Or do you think that people have to compliment you because you do feel that you're superior, actually?
I believe that you believe that.
Yeah. So you.
I believe that you believe that.
Okay.
However, it's completely irrelevant to me what you believe.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to do my best. I'm not being intellectually lazy. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not. I am's what I am. So this is my interpretation of what's going on, and it really relates to how I felt, and it articulates it very well. So number 1, narcissistic supply. What is narcissistic supply? It is the narcissist drug. It's a precious drug. It's our precious, precious drug. And it's a fancy word for attention. So what exactly is it? Can you be more descriptive about attention? Well, basically, the glimmer in your eye when you notice the false self that I mirror out into the world. And I need this supply to, it regulates my sense of self-worth. It's almost like a false, I don't know, like a false self-esteem that doesn't exist. And you're regulating it through the false self and through narcissistic supply to please that sadistic superego, which we're going to talk about in a second. I have to answer to this sadistic superego. The sadistic superego says, have you pushed the godlike image? Have you extracted narcissistic supply? And if not, it's you piece of fucking shit all day long. And really that sadistic ego, and we'll talk about this, is the abusive parent. So I have to make sure that I am generating enough narcissistic supply for the sadistic ego just to be calm. Because 90% of my depression is narcissistic depletion. It's being exhausted from trying to please this sadistic superego. So now let's talk about the false self. The false self. The narcissism is like a private religion where I basically sacrifice myself at the altar to the false self. When I was a little kid and I was being abused, I tucked my inner child, little Matthew, into a little jail cell within my inner universe. And then I let this false self mirror itself out into the world. And then me, Matthew, became a shadow, a whisper. The false self was everything that I wanted to be but couldn't be. Omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent, all-knowing, godlike. And so the false self mirrors itself into the world with a 24/7 directed hunt towards extracting narcissistic supply to please this sadistic superego. So when you've seen me in bands and stuff over the years, or Manic Madeline, this is the false self interacting with the world. That is my false self. So now we're going to talk about the superego. Well, we need a superego. It's important. It's supposed to work for us and with us, not against us. It's what's going to tell us, don't do this, don't do that. There's consequences for this. There's consequences for that. But if you are all superego, there's a big problem. And I'm going to quote Richard Grandin here. If you are all superego, it's, I am the world and the world is me. You are just an extension of me. There is no world. It's just me. I'm running on superego, which happens to be sadistic. This sadistic superego is that abusive parent telling me I'm a piece of shit all day long. So when I adopted narcissism, it was because of deeply seated self-hatred. And that's pretty odd that a 6- and 7-year-old would have deeply seated self-hatred. And so at the same time of dissociating off into grandiosity land, I developed that demented conscience, that sadistic superego, to tell me I'm a piece of shit every day, and I have tasks that the false self has to do. It's a tug of war between me, the false self, and the sadistic superego. And so we're going to get to healing at the end, but the idea is to build a healthy ego and not this sadistic parent. It's a matter of reparenting yourself. So the narcissist lives in a place called the grandiosity gap. So the grandiosity gap is this little village between their fantasy and reality. Now, obviously, reality is inevitably going to conflict with their fantasy, and this causes an injury. This is called a narcissistic injury. So a narcissistic injury could be anything. It could be a slight. It could be, that's why we're hypervigilant. We're in a room where listen to what everybody's saying because we're so important that you might be talking about us and talking shit on us. And so this narcissistic injury can be, we interpret it as life or death. Like you insulting me or disagreeing with me, you wouldn't know, but I internally am processing this as life or death. And inevitably, when the narcissist is outed, which is always the case, like here's my situation. I was outed as a narcissist. I was ostracized. So I had a massive narcissistic injury. And so when the narcissist can't get his drug, they deteriorate like a junkie, like, you know, how a meth person is into their meth. Our precious drug is that precious fucking attention, because I have to answer to this fucking sadistic superego. And that's why people with NPD die sick, is because they spend their whole life trying to please and battle the sadistic superego. Our severe depression, our depressive illness is all based on narcissistic depletion. To quote Sam Vaknin, I'm at 1%, I'm running on 1% capacity. 90% of my energy is sent and directed towards futile pursuits such as extracting narcissistic supply, dealing with the ups and downs of my mood disorders. There is no time for love or interpersonal relationships or just having a good time. There's no time for these things. The narcissist personality is disorganized, we know this, and all of his personas are precariously balanced. There's another thing too called narcissistic rage. And they're still trying to figure this out. It's not like anger. It's like a wall of rage that's there 24/7, whether we are suppressing it or not. It's always there. And unfortunately, the spouses, the secondary sources of narcissistic supply, usually get the brunt of the narcissistic rage. If you prove to be autonomous or complex or fucked with the script I have written in my inner universe, I'm going to immediately resort to devaluation because, hey, I have convinced myself this is who I am and this is what's going on. So yeah, that's these are things that are just not of the common human experience.
The narcissist is an assemblage. He plays host to many personas. In this way, the narcissist has DID, dissociative identity disorder, or what used to be called multiple personality disorder. One of the narcissist personas is always in the limelight. This is the persona, the false self, which interfaces with the outside world, and which guarantees an optimal inflow of narcissistic supply. This is the persona which minimizes friction and resistance to the narcissist's daily dealings, and thus the energy which the narcissist needs to expend in the process of obtaining said narcissistic supply. The limelight persona is surrounded by shade personas. The shade personas are potential personas, ready to surface as soon as needed by the narcissist. Their emergence.
Hello. So, how did I become a narcissist? How the fuck did that happen? It's crazy you can be alive for 35 years and be so in grandiosity you have no idea what you're doing here on Earth. Let alone the multitude of abusive behaviors you're exhibiting. Fucking sad and scary. It's a game. It's a very dangerous game. So, like everybody else, when I was born, I was a perfect child of the universe, the source, perfect child of God, whatever you want to call it. I had no guilt or shame, even with my dirty diapers. There was no guilt or shame. It just was. I was just being the beast in the field, rejoicing in the fleshly life. We're all perfect when we're born. It's our experiences here on Earth in this environment that give us all these inadequacies and detach us from morality. And the hard piece is that it's up to us and nobody else to reattach to that morality. It's an unfortunate circumstance here on Earth. So, when I was born, I was immediately abandoned by my father at birth. I had a 15-year-old mother who was distant. So I started developing one of the feature characteristics in the pathological narcissist, which is attachment dysfunction. I had an attachment disorder. I didn't form any bonds with the adults in my life at that age. I didn't. And so the mother then proceeded to marry an abusive man. So from the ages of 5 to 15, I was sadistically sexually abused, sadistically psychologically abused, sadistically physically abused, and sadistically emotionally abused. This started at the beginning chapters of my personality, and so essentially I didn't get to form an identity. Only self-defense mechanisms. And so even when I was going through puberty, I was being molested and beat and treated like shit. So that also played a role in why I've been so awkward sexually in my life and could not relate to women and be able to have these interpersonal, like, human feelings. So during the beginning of the abuse, I said to myself, I had decided this is a hostile environment. I have to somehow get the fuck out of this hostile environment. And so I started dissociating, detached from reality. Kind of like, when you're in your car and it's autopilot and you don't remember driving to the store. Now, the narcissist is pretty much on autopilot all the time, even when you're talking to him. Imagine autopilot times 10. That was my go-to. It was a magical land. It was a grandiose place where I was omniscient, godlike, and I didn't get abused. And I wasn't the piece of shit that I thought I was. I mean, if this is a severe depressive illness. So when I'm 6 years old and I have to resort to narcissism because I have deeply seated self-hatred, that is fucking twisted and that's terribly wrong. So I started developing a demented conscious, that sadistic superego. I formed that false self in my little private religion. I tucked away little Matthew in a little jail cell in my inner universe. Matthew was killed. I was killed by these people at 6 years old. I was murdered. Matthew was fucking murdered. I ceased to exist. I became a hall of mirrors, a finely tuned self-defense mechanism. And so, not only did I think that was a hostile environment, as I got older, I determined that this was a hostile world. And so, that's why I held everybody in contempt, every motherfucker in it. So, I obviously started getting the consequences of a pathological narcissist. But I didn't think I was a narcissist. When you're a narcissist, a pathological narcissist, we write a movie script, which is reality. We write the script in our inner universe. And none of you are real people. You're two-dimensional cardboard cutout cartoons. And when you deviate from the script and prove to be autonomous or complex, from a multitude of reasons, but mainly not putting up with my shit, I immediately would resort to devaluation. Because I have convinced myself this is who I am and this is what's going on. So this obviously led to failed relationship after failed relationship and failed friendship after failed friendship. And the farther, the grandiosity gap that I talked about, the farther you bridge that gap between fantasy and reality, the more you become psychotic, and then eventually schizotypal or a schizoid. And then you just deteriorate. Normally when the narcissist is outed completely, and he has no alternatives, he will say, I've had it with the shabby world, you are no longer worthy of me. And they'll go and become schizoid or schizotypal, and immediately turn to dust like a vampire. So, let's talk about romantic relationships. I've been in only a few because they've been so long. So what does the narcissist do? The narcissist, let's use my marriage for an example. I met a beautiful woman who was a codependent. So I sucked her in. I showed her, the false self showed her the hurty, bleeding child. I showed her the traumatized, hurt child that is irresistible to the codependent. And so while that's happening, I'm idealizing her and creating a reflected self for her. Like this reflection that she's unaware of, that's subconsciously making herself fall in love with herself. And then, while that's happening, I take the abused child away, and then I show her the hall of fucking smoking mirrors, which is my real personality, and the abuse starts. I'm an abuser. All narcissists are abusers. It's in our pathology to abuse. That's how we export pain. There's no exceptions to this rule. And we use a myriad of abuse techniques: gaslighting, ambient abuse, abuse by proxy. And I think the biggest abuse thing I was using, strategy, was being unempathic. You want to drive somebody crazy, be unempathic every fucking day. And so what happens is, if a woman is with this person going under such fucking distress, such narcissistic abuse, they themselves have a break of reality and become as sick as the narcissist and have to adopt, if not narcissistic coping strategies, other. And I was too sick to understand what was going on, and I'm seeing it now, and it is fucking devastating. See, the narcissist does a lot of complex things, like inducing narcissism into his partner. So I would treat my wife shitty in a certain way. I'd be emotionally abusive a certain way. So I would push all this confounded bullshit on her. And then she would become the narcissist for a minute and start being shitty towards me. And what I'm doing is transferring my pain to her. See, we think that everybody can carry our pain. And what I was doing is, hey, can I take a rest? Could you suffer for a little bit? Could you suffer? Can I take a break? That right there is a cry for help. My grandiosity was a cry for help. My lack of empathy was a cry for help. Even when I'm like, tell me I'm a genius, tell me I play good at guitar, tell me my band is the best band in town. Underneath what I'm saying is, can you please ease my suffering? Because we are in agony. Internally, we are in fucking agony. And we are just full of fucking internal rage and pain and agony. So we have to get it out. Like a country with too much goods they have to export it. We export our pain through abusive behavior. We hand it to our partner and we say, can you take on my pain? And that's what it is. But you have to be careful. These narcissists will turn you into a narcissist. Pathological narcissism breeds pathological narcissism. People joke and say that the narcissist is an energy vampire, but really he's like a real vampire. He bites your neck and he infects you. So my whole life has been completely destroyed by this dissociative game. And it is a game. It's a fucking game. What the narcissist says to the woman is, you will play this game with me, or I will fucking destroy you and kick you out of my little fucking world. How's it going, everybody? Normal people, just like me, right? Because I'm a normal person. I'm not especially good, and I'm not especially bad. I'm a person, just like you. No better, no worst, just a person like you. I'm kind of excited this morning, even after I had a nightmare. I had a fucking nightmare. And I was the asshole monster in the nightmare. And I woke up bawling. Number one, that's progress, me bawling. Being able to cry and going with it. But the progress that I'm sharing was that I comforted myself and I treated myself nice and sweet while that was happening. And I had to tell myself, that's not me. That is the superego. So this is my progress that I want to share. It's fucking rare for people with NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, to heal. It is possible. and it is happening for me. But you have to be a strong motherfucker, which I am. And like I said, you have to walk through the valley of the dead. And it takes years. I'm 2 years into this work, and I'm starting to see marginal progress. So the world's authority on psychology is Psychology Today. It's a magazine. They have said that narcissistic personality disorder, is a severe depressive illness. And there's like 5 steps you got to do to heal. And funny enough, before I even read this data, that's exactly how I've been healing. So the first thing you have to understand and you have to put in your head is that narcissism is not the opposite of codependency. The narcissist is quite codependent. The codependent and the narcissist have very similar voids. They just adopted different coping strategies. As a little kid, I opted out, and decided to take the narcissistic escape, the dissociation, because codependents and narcissists are both either abused or pampered. The child is either put on a pedestal or the pedestal is put on the child. I am the child that the pedestal got put on. So I adopted this dissociation fantasy land as a little kid. And that was my answer to everything. That's what saved my life. It's actually, narcissism is probably the most loving thing I've ever done for myself, in a sense, as weird as that sounds. And part of me wants to feel shame because I suffer from NPD, because that's the way we willy-nilly describe a jerk, but people don't understand what that is. And because I need to be sweet to myself, I'm not going to judge myself. That was an adoptive survival strategy. That was my only way I was going to survive in this world. So, number 1, emotional regulation. We're talking about personality archetypes. So, your personality archetype is your combobulation of emotions that represents you generally. That's going to present your personality. So, what they've also said in Psychology Today is that the sad baby and the angry toddler are not more so with the narcissistic personality disorder versus the codependent. So basically, my emotional archetypes have been 2 different emotional archetypes in my life. The sad baby, number 1. The sad baby, I want the thing, and you won't give me the thing. You won't give it to me. And then the angry toddler, you won't give me the thing, I shall punish you by hitting you in the leg with a Tonka truck. So, I didn't have the agency. Babies and toddlers don't have the agency to grasp reality and act like an adult. It's healthy for kids to act that way. It's when those behaviors and emotions become malignant, and I'm an adult being a sad baby and angry toddler. So right there, emotional regulation, dialectical behavioral therapy, learning how to regulate my emotions to build a different personality archetype, which I have been doing. Number 2, the sadistic superego. So when you're a kid and you hurt yourself on accident, you notice like a kid will look at the parent before they even react to see how their parent, should I laugh, should I cry? Like if you ever tell a kid, like you ever see a kid's face when you tell them they did a good job and they're just like, oh, I did a good job. I found that stone in the woods. Oh, wow. So that you're giving them a healthy ego. And in their adult life, they're going to be able to know right from wrong, consequences of your actions. But when a kid is sadistically abused, it's you're a worthless piece of shit, no matter what. So when I was little, at the same time I started dissociating into this fantasy land, I developed a demented conscience, a superego, to tell me that I'm a piece of shit all day long. And that's why, beyond the abuse, why I adopted narcissism, because of deeply seated self-hatred. And so I essentially am all superego. There's no healthy ego. So when someone is all superego, it's, I am the world and the world is me. You are an extension of me. Like, there is no world. And to be running on a sadistic conscience like this is where the narcissist needs attention. The narcissistic supply, the narcissist drug, is because the narcissist will, if they don't get help, they'll spend their whole life battling this sadistic superego. That is the only reason they need attention. The superego says to me every day, have you pushed the godlike image? Have you extracted attention? If not, you worthless piece of fucking shit, all day long. And so that's why, like, 90% of my depression is narcissistic depletion, because you're constantly trying to please this fucking sadistic superego. So, that is the biggest battle. That is what you have to do is build a healthy ego. And so what I've done is started challenging this voice. And I noticed about 2 months ago, a sweet voice started happening in my inner universe that pats me on the leg almost and tells me that I'm a good person. That is not us. And what that is doing is pushing that fucking false self out, that demented conscience. And it'll fight. It's like an alien getting, a flamethrower and no, I can't go, blah, blah, blah. And that's where it'll uber attack you. So that's where I've had these serious bouts of depression and suicidal ideation. That's pain being caused by this superego. And so they said for anyone to really get results, they will start seeing, you will start hearing this voice. So the second that started happening for me, I started bawling because I've put in enough work where that's happened. It's literally, if you're not strong and you don't have the right attitude about facing this, you might as well abandon all hope. He who enter here. To battle a sadistic superego is nuts. And another thing too, it's philosophy. It's expanding your consciousness, a higher thinking. And that's what I've been doing nonstop, educating myself, thinking better. I honestly can be like, hey, people have wants, they have needs, they exist, they're real just like me. Their needs, their wishes matter too. Not me. I'm not God. I'm not the king of the world. It's not all is me and the world is me. You are an extension of me. I am not especially good and I'm not especially bad. I'm a person just like you. So these things all balanced together have created this. It's like it started the loving parent. That sadistic ego, that is the abusive parent yelling at me all day long. So what I'm doing is, it's by developing a healthy ego, I'm reparenting myself. The healthy ego, that little sweet angelic voice that I'm talking about, that tells me that I'm loving, and I touch myself on the chest and the leg and I love you, Matthew. That's not us. We are good. We do care about people. That is coming into control, and it is battling the sadistic ego. It's taken a couple years. This shit does not work, change overnight. It's not like boop, so I've added all that with philosophy, higher thinking, emotional regulation, building a healthy ego, changing the personality archetype through emotional regulation. I'm sorry, I'm really excited right now because this is a very daunting task. Remember, I have spent my life as a sad baby and an angry toddler, and that's what I'm trying to change. I want to have an actual human experience as an adult. I want to treat people like they deserve to be treated. I don't have to be afraid anymore. I'm not an afraid little kid. I'm a grown adult. I don't need to be afraid of the world. I don't need to seek the opinion. I don't need you to tell me I'm as fantastic as I believe I am. Because I just am. I'm not fantastic. I'm not especially good. And I'm not especially bad either. I'm just like you. And your wishes, needs, opinions, that matters just as much as mine. This isn't all about me. Trauma, complex. So you have to forget that this is a narcissistic personality disorder. And you have to say, okay, we understand this is complex post-traumatic stress disorder. So it needs to be treated like complex post-traumatic stress disorder and codependency. The narcissist is a codependent. It literally, besides a few ways of handling reality, the narcissist has more of a reality impairment. They're almost the same thing. So I feel good that I'm starting to feel that way. And I'll tell you, in the past couple of years, I've really been able to have empathy and to not feel like I'm king shit. And like even this is not godlike for me, for anyone to be talking about this humiliating stuff. And it's not humiliating because you know what? It was a survival technique that I had to adopt to survive. It's actually something sweet I did for myself. But unfortunately, that sadistic superego has taken over. You can't be all superego. That you just can't. It literally. So I'm excited about my progress, and one day at a time. I love you.